outside taps like this one are something that everyone should have, and often people don't realise that they're actually really easy to install. And today I'm going to take you through the process step by step so that by the end of the video you'll be able to install an outside tap like this yourself. So the first thing you want to do in this process is to find a location for your outside tap. So come outside and choose a location where you want your outside tap to go, and you really want to make sure that it comes out below a sink or somewhere where there's good access to the mains cold pipe, because that is what we're going to be connecting into. Now here in the UK, the most common position you're likely to place your outside tap is where there's a sink on the other side of the wall, normally in a kitchen that faces out into your back garden, for example, or in this case in this utility room that backs onto the side alleyway where the back garden is. So that's kind of the most common place you want to be looking to take a water feed for your outside tap. So this is where you need your first component. This is an outside tap hose union back plate. Any of the key components that you'll need for this job will be in the description down below. So grab yourself one of these. So our back plate is connected to a 15mm piece of copper pipe. Now what we want to do is feed that piece of copper pipe through the wall in a position that comes through under the sink the other side, somewhere where the supply for the cold water is nice and easy to connect into. This is a 15mm piece of copper pipe, so we need to drill a 16mm hole through the outer leaf, through the cavity and the inner leaf, all the way through into the other side. We will be making this hole a little bit bigger in a minute to accommodate our sleeving. But I don't like to put that through there first. I like to go through with a pilot hole before I put this one through. We'll pass the 8mm one through the wall first. I've measured out where I'm going to come through the other side. I'm happy with my position. Let's start drilling. And now I'll just follow my pilot hole with the 16mm bit. And that will be a hole that passes all the way through into the service area behind your cabinets, either in your utility room or your kitchen. Next, we're going to feed the copper pipe through the wall, all the way through to the other side. And now all we need to do is mark the 3 holes on the plate. To do that, I like to use the Marksman. Link will be down below in the description. All you do is just spray a mark onto the brick, and you can see that that's marked the location of each hole perfectly for us to drill. Drill the 3 marks that you made with your Marksman. Now we can just pop some 6mm plugs in there. I'm now going to run a 22mm SDS bit through that hole. The reason for that is we need to sleeve the pipe. So you can use 22mm copper to sleeve for your 15mm, but the problem is if you do that you're going to end up with a bigger hole, and that's going to make the hole come really close to the screw holes in the back plate. So I like to use 20mm plastic conduit, and you can see that fits nice and snug. Push that all the way through to the other side. What we'll do now is we'll go the other side, we'll mark it so we know exactly how much we need to cut off. Pull the pipe back out. We can see the mark there that we made. Just cut on the mark and pop the piece of pipe back in the hole. Pass that copper pipe back through, and it should line up with those 3 plugs that you've got in the wall now. Grab some silicone sealant and just seal around the base of the plate. So if I show you, if we just pump some sealant just around the base of that plate. You can use the cheap stuff for this. There just needs to be enough on there so that when we screw this in place it kind of spreads out and creates a seal. That way no water can pass through the hole, track back along the pipe and create damp indoors. Push that back plate all the way into position. You might see some silicone squish out there. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. We can just smooth that off afterwards. Now just do the 3 screws up. But that will spread that silicone out, which is exactly what we want. What we're now going to do is fix the tap into the wall plate. So we're going to be using this outside tap here. It's a 15mm to 1/2 inch outside tap with a hose union on it. So you've got 2 options for fixing this into your plate. Now your first option, you could use PTFE, but the only trouble with PTFE, it's not as good for backing the joint off if you go a little bit too far, and at the end of the day we want this to line up, because if it's not perfectly level it'll look horrible. So we may need to back it off. PTFE tape is not as good at being backed off, but with this one it is very cheap and most people have it in the bag, so you could use that if you want to. The other option you have is Loctite 55 cord. In my opinion, it's a better product for this job. It creates a fantastic seal and it's a lot better for backing off your joint if you go a little bit too far, so you'll be able to get that tap perfectly level. If you want to see a video that I made explaining a little bit more about this stuff and demonstrating it as well, click on this video up here. Let's apply this to the tap. Get that cord started on the thread, so a couple of turns on the end of the thread, and then start to just cross it over the threads. You can then just cut that off just like that, and you can see that will be perfect for the job. Now get that started off and you'll feel that that starts to go tight very quickly. You don't need any tools for this, you just want to do this hand tight. So we're on our last turn now, and that has now created the perfect seal. That's how easy it is. That's all we need to do on the outside. You can see how neat this method is. What we're going to do now is go on the inside, where I'll show you how to connect the tap up with the cold water supply. Before we do that, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button, because you don't want to miss out on all the great videos that I've got to come. And hit the like button for me if the video's helping you out, because that allows the video to get out there and reach more people and help more people on YouTube. Right, let's get inside and connect this up. So you can see we've come out here under the utility room sink. That could be a kitchen sink for you, it doesn't really matter. As long as you've come out somewhere where you can gain access to your mains water pipe, that is perfect. That's the tail end of the copper that's attached to the wall plate. All we'll need to do is cut that off to wherever we need it to be and connect it into our mains cold water. So how do we know which one is the mains cold water? Well, what you can do is turn both taps on in the sink above where you're working, and one of these pipes is going to get warm. For me it's going to be that one, that's the hot water pipe, and that's the cold pipe, and that's the easiest way for you to find out which one is hot and cold. Now before we go any further, what we need to do is turn off the water to the house so that we're not going to go and get wet. Don't go ahead and cut into the mains water until you're sure that there's no water coming out of the taps. So hopefully you can see a little bit about what I'm going to explain to you. All we need to do now is connect the mains cold up to the pipe we've just put through the wall. The way we're going to do that is we're going to cut into this cold pipe here. We've got a nice bit of copper pipe here that we can tee off from to bring our cold supply over to that pipe. Now I'm going to solder this, but if you don't have the tools or the ability to solder, then it's fine to use push fit fittings, and there's a little guide going to pop up somewhere on the screen that'll teach you how to use push fit fittings if you want to do this with push fits. So we'll cut this copper pipe now and put a T in. So we're going to tee off using a Yorkshire fitting. I'm going to place that T somewhere around there. So what I want to do now is just make a cut with a 15mm cutter just on that pipe. You'll get a little bit of water come out, but it shouldn't be anything too crazy. We'll just mark the shoulders of the T, and then we just want to cut that whole section out of there. Grab a copper T like this, give it a clean up with some wire wool. You just want to clean the inside of the fitting. This is a Yorkshire fitting, so that means there's solder already inside. This is not really a full guide on how to use Yorkshire fittings. If you want to see that, like I say, there is a video on the channel. All my plumbing videos will be found in the playlist that will pop up at the end of this one, because this video really does just kind of scratch the surface. There's so much more to learn, so make sure you hit that playlist and check out some of those videos. Just clean up the pipe you're connecting onto as well with some wire wool. Make sure the fitting and all of the ends of the copper pipes are cleaned up before you go ahead and solder. If you have a deburring tool, just deburr the copper pipes as well. Now we're going to get a bit of flux like this. Pop a bit of flux around all those copper pipes. Right, now we're going to put the, if you don't hit your head at least 5 times when you're doing this, you're definitely not doing the job right. So now we want to get this T in position. This can sometimes be a little bit tricky depending how much tension you've got on the pipe. So this one isn't too bad. We can actually get that T in position relatively easily. Now I'm just going to use a torch to solder that T in place. So next up, there's two components that we need to fit. One of those is an isolation valve like this, and the other one is a double check valve. The job of the isolation valve is so that we can isolate the outside tap if we need to. So next we need to install that. It has a flow direction on it. Make sure you get the flow direction the correct way round. So we'll place that on the pipe next. Next up, this is what we call a double check valve. It again has a flow direction and it needs to go next in line from the isolation valve. The purpose of a double check valve like this is to stop water from outside going back inside the mains water supply, because you don't want any nasties getting back in there. So we'll join these two bits together now with a short piece of copper. And these are just compression fittings, like any other compression fitting really. You just push the nut and olive over the pipe, and we're going to push that into the fitting. I'm just going to pop a little bit of plumber's mate onto the olive, and then we'll just do that up with our grips. Just grab a pair of grips and an adjustable spanner and do up the nut nice and tight. Make sure you get the two flows the same way round, and then just do the same again. Of course, try and keep them nice and neat so it looks something like that. Hopefully you can kind of see this. It's really tough getting the camera in here to record this. I'm going to put that little fitting that we've made up there on the end of that piece of copper pipe. We've got our isolation valve and then our double check valve. And now we'll just link the double check valve to our outside tap with a section of copper. Just grab an elbow and look at how much length you need to leave on the end of that copper pipe. And now we can just cut the excess off the pipe. Place your elbow on, and that gives you something to now work to. Now it's really easy from here. We can just assemble the rest of our little setup. There you go. That is perfect. We'll just clean up the pipes now, put a load of flux on the joints. So before I solder all this up, what I want to do is just make sure there's no heat transfer back to my check valve from when I do my soldering. So if your check valve is in place, just grab a damp cloth and you can just wrap that around the check valve, and that way there'll be no damage to the check valve from heat transfer coming back to the internals of it. Right, let's solder these joints. So that's the joints all soldered now. What I would say is if you're soldering in somewhere that's not a old carcass that's going to be ripped out like this is, make sure you use a proper heat mat if you're soldering. So what we're going to do now is turn the water back on, the isolation valve back on, and give this a test. Once the water's back on, do just give it a little check for leaks. Right, moment of truth. If you followed along, you should have a fully operational outside tap. Like that. If you've enjoyed the video and found it useful, hit this playlist here because there's loads more to learn, and hit this video because you're going to like that one as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one.